before 1787. We have records of them, we have the notes, we have the rules of all of those conventions, and every single one of those conventions in all of American history has been held one state, one vote. And unless we think this is some sort of ancient historical anachronism, interstate conventions were relatively regular until the 1950s. One that you might be familiar with, there was an interstate convention to create the compact that governs the Colorado River today. Again, one state, one vote, it's always been that way. Now let's talk about the practical aspects of it outside the history. In the event that there were to be some sort of motion to change it to maybe popular representation based on population, which is something that small states with low populations should be concerned about. That's happened one time in American history in the convention in 1861 that was held to try and avoid the Civil War. A state made a motion to change it from one state, one vote to a population basis. The states voted one state, one vote against that. It's the only time it's ever even been tried. And then here's the practical reality. You control your delegation, all states do. And in the event that they were to try to overturn one state, one vote, all small states would leave the convention, practically speaking, depriving the convention of a quorum. Mr. Chairman?
Any further questions? Representative Jennings?
Mr. Chairman, Mr. Medley, I just have just a little more edification maybe from you. You mentioned history and tradition, and I find that an interesting combination because in our history of 200 plus years, this has never occurred. And so our tradition has been that we've been very cautious or we've been very skeptical of having this happen for some reason. Maybe you could edify us a little more on that.
Mr. Chairman, so over the course of American history, we actually haven't been all that cautious. There have been over 500 applications made by the states for a convention. We've never reached the threshold of 34 states actually submitting identical applications. So that's why we've never held a convention. It is not out of an abundance of caution. This is something that states resolve to do with relative regularity. Literally every single session of the states, there are states proposing for a convention. The question, the reason we've never gotten to convention is there has never been a nationally organized effort with a center, with grassroots nationwide to push it, with a reach into all the legislatures in the country to coordinate such an effort. So in my view, and again, that's just my view of history, that's the reason why we've never gotten to convention. It's not because the states didn't desire it or they were so cautious.
Follow-up?
So, Mr. Chairman, so in your view, it's been in practice, it's been available for 200 plus years, but we've just never been organized. So our founders gave us a document with the answer, but not the organization.
Mr. Chairman, Representative, yes, that's correct. The founders, if you look at the Constitution, it is not an instruction manual in any of the articles on how to get things done. The Constitution is a document that sets the structure of governance in our country. If we want to look to the instruction manual, as close as I could point you would be to the Federalist Papers, the debate that took place around the ratification of the Constitution. And the founders were very clear in the Federalist Papers that they were in favor of the states gathering in convention. In fact, the man who proposed it spoke regularly about this during the ratification debates, Colonel George Mason, and he proposed, and was roundly agreed by the founders, that it should be, as he called it, constitutional, regular, and easy to get into convention.
Further questions? Representative Kelly.
So Article 5 was adopted at the Constitutional Convention, which by definition was the ultimate runaway convention. What do we have to prevent a runaway convention where virtually every lunatic fringe concept idea gets thrown out there from those of us on the left, those on the right? What safeguards do?
Mr. Chairman, Representative Pelkey, with all due respect, I have to make a historical correction.
Okay.
And there are many people who would say that the 1787 convention was a runaway. In the last roughly 8 years, there's new research that has been done on that issue, and I would encourage you to visit our website and actually look at the commissions, which are the documents that each commissioner brings to the convention that describes their authority. Madison said definitively in the Federalist Papers, if we wish to know the authority of the commissioners at the convention, the states control the authority of the commissioners, and we should review their commissions. And we've now done so. The vast majority, all but 2 of the commissioners, had this in their commissions, this exact language. It said, the commissioner has all authority necessary to render the federal constitution adequate for the exigencies of the union, without limitation. And to clarify, this is really important, the word constitution at that time did not mean a document. It actually meant the form of government. They had the full authority to render the form of government. Where the idea that they were limited to the amending of the Articles of Confederation comes from is, like Congress likes to do today, when Congress saw the states all acting, Congress said, hey, we think this is a good idea too. And they issued what they say in their own proclamation was a recommendation that the states gather in convention. And they used the language to amend the Articles of Confederation. What most people don't realize is if you read on in that recommendation, it also uses the exact same language and to render the federal constitution adequate, et cetera. So there actually never was a runaway convention according to the founders and according to their legal documents that they brought with them to the convention. So that's number one. Number two, getting into convention itself. And the question of what is it in convention that actually prevents, as you put it, lunatics from both sides or crazy people on both sides of the aisle from proposing wild things. I would start first with the end of the convention. It's important to remember that a convention cannot alter the Constitution. All a convention can do, I like to call it a suggesting convention. In the end, if they can come to agreement among the majority of states, they will make suggestions that the states consider a variety of amendment proposals. So will then be sent to the states for ratification by 3/4 of the states, 38 states thus having to ratify. What that means in the converse is that it takes only 13 states, and actually if it goes to the state legislatures, which is likely, only 1 house in each of 13 states to stop any proposal. What this means in practicality, understanding politics all across the nation, is there are easily 13 states on either side of the aisle that could stop anything in 1 house that either party would consider radical or wild. So that's the end game. The process is important too. As you get into convention, you'll pass this resolution, which is essentially the law of the convention, the rails that the convention runs on. You will send your commissioners with what are actually called commissions, which are documents that limit their authority. You have the absolute authority to do that, just under standard agency law. I don't know if there are any lawyers in the room. I apologize for that. There you go, there's a couple. So under standard agency law, when you appoint an agent, they have only the authority that you review them with. So they go only with your authority. If they were to exceed that authority, their actions are actually null and void. You don't have to even do anything, but you would. You'll be paying attention to what they do. You would reprimand them. You would tell them to change what they're doing, or you would recall them and bring them home. You guys have passed additional legislation or working on additional legislation to add actual penalties to that. And then you would require that in what will be essentially a legislative body that nobody raises a point of order. In other words, you have rules that'll run on Mason's rules just like you do. Anybody from any state, conservative or liberal, can raise a hand, raise a point of order and say that's out of order. It's not within the resolution upon which this is called, likely to be sustained by the chair of the parliamentarian of the convention. Then it takes 26 states, so if you assume that it could run away, you have to get the majority of states to run away. Their delegations voting in majority to cast their vote. And then you have to get it out and get it ratified. And that doesn't even involve, as a lawyer, all the legal challenges that would come were they to exceed their authority. So there are multiple built-in processes in the convention process itself to prevent any type of runaway from actually happening.
Representative Comm.
So you see the convention itself as probably being the beginning of a multi-year process. Not only the convention, but the ratification, or the presentation of amendments, the ratification, the equitable legal challenges. How many years do you think it would take before we actually see some change like that?
Mr. Chairman, Representative, boy, my crystal ball isn't that good. I think, I'll give you just sort of a realistic guesstimate, because that's about the best I could do. I think that on the current momentum, Representative Winters was asked the question, how many, where are we at? We've passed in 8 states. 39 states are actually considering this resolution right now, so significant progress is being made. Trying to be realistic instead of optimistic, I figure we get 8 to 10 this year. If everything goes well, we could get upwards of 20 this year. So a maximum, say, 28 this year. That would allow us, I think, to finish off in the next legislative session. We have less opportunity there because the biennial legislatures, there's a few that aren't in. So let's say we get to 34 states in 2018. Congress would then have to call the convention. That's their obligation, time, and place. By the way, most legal scholars say that there's no, if Congress doesn't call, the states will just convene anyway under their sovereign authority. So convention, I imagine, will convene relatively quickly once the 34 state threshold is met. And how long they take is anybody's guess. Here's my best guess. The shortest legislative sessions in the country are 45 days. I imagine if the thing is going fast, you could go 45 days. But I would guess somewhere between 45 days and 6 months. And then my guess is the ratification fight takes anywhere from a year to 3 years. Traditionally, ratification is somewhere between a year and 2 years if you look at our history.
Sure. Are we good, committee? Okay, Mr. Meckler, thank you very
Thank you,
much.
Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Committee. Appreciate that opportunity.
Protocol would suggest that I call on any of the legislators who want to speak. Any of you, Representative Hino?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. I'll be brief. I know you guys have a lot of testimony ahead of you, but I'm in favor of this legislation. I'll stand for any questions.
Questions? Representative? Okay, thank you. Okay, other gentlemen, okay? Representative Clem?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. I'll be brief as well. We've talked during the balanced budget amendment, and we had mentioned at that time the mock convention that we went to this summer, including my colleague over here to the right, Dan Larson, and Jim Allen. I'm not sure, Jim isn't here at the moment. And we were privileged to go to that. And again, I would just emphasize that the process works. We were, it's interesting, the delegates from all 50 states gathered together, and then the staff really sat on the sidelines and then let us run the thing. And it didn't end up in disaster. It didn't run away. It was orderly. And we set our own rules. We elected our own president. We broke off in committees. We elected our committee chairman. And I can tell you the committees were something else, because there was a lot of point of orders raised, things that we had to get hashed out, and it took a little while to get clicking. I'll be honest with that. And but once we started to get into that rhythm, and really we had committee work one day, and then we were, as it were, committee of the whole the second day, debating these issues, these same limitations that are in the same application that you're looking at right now. So those were the limitations that we were looking at. And I just want to inform the committee that the process works. The founders really were brilliant, and I have full confidence that not only did the founders did do a good thing, a brilliant thing by putting this in the Constitution, but they knew that the states could do it. And so with that, I would stand for any questions.
Representative Jennings.
Mr. Chairman, Representative Scott, so basically what you really can tell us is that if someone else pays for this to mock convention, that a mock convention works.
Representative Clem.
Mr. Chairman, it's important to realize this wasn't a real convention, but there hadn't been anything done like this before. Again, as you alluded to, we hadn't had this, a real convention, a convention of the states for proposed amendments to the Constitution. I haven't had it before. And so I guess the real question was, could this actually work? It was a test, if you will, a test that wasn't binding by any means, but it was a test nonetheless. And again, yeah, you have to bring people to certain areas in order to perform the test. It takes some muscle, it's not just political muscle, but it takes some monetary muscle in order to do that. And so, so it was purely a test. But it took a lot of muscle to perform that test.
Vice Chairman Winters.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Representative, at the convention, was there quite a bit of discussion regarding the historicity of how it has worked in the past, for instance, in 1861, and how some of the flow went back then as well? Because there has been, there is a bit of structure that has been formulated in the past.
Mr. Chairman, Vice Chairman Winters, you know, there were some side conversations, and there were some conversations that I didn't get too deep into that, but certainly that was on people's minds. You know, when we went to this mock convention, I had in mind, how is this done in the past? You know, and with relative ease, we kind of just fit right in, and with the benefit of many who were at this mock convention were legislators themselves, so they knew how the process worked, They knew from their own state legislators, although the rules and whatnot are different in each chamber, each state. But they knew kind of what to expect. And so there was a level of decorum there, and there was, kind of searching back in our history, is this how it was done? Are we doing the right thing? So it was interesting, and it was kind of a learning lesson too. I think there's some takeaways of, if we were to be collectively put together, those who were to, some more discussions were to be had, what can we learn from this?
Representative Jennings?
Mr. Chairman, I appreciate that it was a learning experience and that it was learning the process. Who selected the delegates to this?
Representative Clay.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Representative Jennings. This was put on by the Conventions of State Project. And so they have, and they could, and again, that might be one of those things that I might not be the best person to answer that. But each state has, as you were, grassroots workers that are looking for legislators who are willing to take a chance, willing to stand up and be courageous, and willing to say, willing to wave their fist in the hand of the federal government, as it were, and say enough. And so, so they could speak on that a little bit more as how they select the people. That's not really for me to answer.
Thank you, Representative Clay. Would anyone else like to speak regarding the bill, whether you're for it or against it? Okay, come on in.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. I'm just a constituent of District 1.
And could we would like your name.
Oh, Julie Baker, I'm sorry. I'm a bit nervous. I think we all pretty much on some level agree that the federal government has amassed too much power. And I don't see them, deciding on their own that they're going to give that power up. They're addicted to it, and quite frankly, they need an intervention, I think. And the Constitution has provided that intervention in Article 5. And so I just wonder, when, as Americans, have we become weenies? When have we become so scared to use the Constitution? That's what we're supposed to be using, right? So, excuse me, I'm very nervous. Anyway. Huh? So, anyway, that's all I had to say. Let's stand up and be courageous. Think about what they went through when they wrote the Constitution in the first place, right? Thank you.
Okay. Any questions for Ms. Baker?
Oh, I don't know I could answer any.
Oh, you did fine, thank you. Would anybody else like to speak? Mr. Winnie?
Mr. Chairman, Bill Winnie, Sublette County. I look at this with a slight twist to what you've heard. And my question would be, why is it important? We have the 10th Amendment. And so why doesn't the 10th Amendment work? Well, in my view, the 10th Amendment doesn't work is because the arbiters are typically the federal judiciary. That's the role they're supposed to play, but nevertheless, they end up doing that. And in my observation, they have a tendency to say, don't ask us to fix what you can fix at the ballot box. And so, and that's a legitimate thing for them to do too. I don't have any problem with that directly. On the other hand, what this proposes is a somewhat different ballot box. Subject to your questions, Mr. Chairman, thank you.
Questions for Mr. Winnie? Right, thank you. Mr. McElvain.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Bill McElvain. Today I'm just an ordinary citizen. A few years ago I sat where you sat and made decisions just like you are making now. I am one of the lead promoters of House Joint Resolution number 2, which passed through your hands. And I apologize for not being here. I was out of town due to a funeral and wasn't here, which I was very disappointed because I have worked hard for the last several years on this issue. My position on this issue is you're part of the process. And we feel that House Joint Resolution 2 is headed in the right direction. We have 28 states that we're sure I've already passed this, and we can share that with you if you're interested. So we are far out from getting this